With the ever-expanding amount of memory available to create games from, it's often filled with all manner of strange and wonderful content, amazing visuals, and of course, an entire plethora of wild and wacky characters. However, occasionally, developers can go a little too far with their creativity, and for whatever reason, have their avatars nixed from the final build. But said developers can also find it a little too hard to let them go. And despite having their inspirations vetoed for whatever reason, they'll defy their bosses and secretly include them still. So, this episode, we hunt for these expunged establishments, these taboo typecasts, and these annulled avatars. As I say. But hello you, I'm Guru Larry, and I welcome you to Fact Hunt. 5 banned/deleted characters that are still secretly in the game. Wrestling games are one of the best places to find hidden characters, just as they're also a good place to find people who shouldn't be in the game at all. Almost every WWE game features a roster peppered with guys that have earned the ire of Mr. McMahon and have been told, in no uncertain terms, that they're fired. Or FIRED, as Vince would say. No one ever expects a WWF, or E, or whatever game to have a fully up-to-date roster. Either people will be in who are now out, or people who should be there are missing. There's not much to say about all of these, but there is something to say about the case of Adam Bomb. This strange character, a goofy but cool-looking radiation-obsessed heel, was supposed to be included in Midway's arcade smash, WrestleMania, the arcade game. I mean, it'd probably be pretty cool to see him lobbing mini nukes into Shawn Michaels' face, wouldn't it? However, he wasn't in the game, so you might say that he fell out of it. Get it? Fallout? No, shut up. To be honest, no one would have cared too much if he was there or not. If it wasn't for a Midway exec named Roger Sharp saying that he was in the game after the game was released. Why would he say such a thing, even though Adam Bomb wasn't in the game at all? It appears the game's afoot. This is Midway we're talking about after all. Weird hidden characters are their bread and butter. So Grapple fans went all out looking for a way to unlock Adam Bomb. But they never found him. No matter what, the guy was out of reach. People assumed the suit must have made some sort of boo-boo, until footage appeared showing Adam Bomb being captured for the game, hitting moves on some poor unsuspecting programmers. He was there all along. He even had a pic taken with the development team. The legend is real. Eventually, programmer Sal DeVita explained that Adam Bomb was indeed hidden in the code, but the character was never fully completed. Most presume that he was dropped when the man himself left the WWF in the summer of 1995. Not long before the release of this game. If that's true, it's a rare case of the WWF actually bothering to make sure a game's roster is fully up to date. In a strange coincidence, when the man behind Adam Bomb, Brian Clark, jumped to the WCW, he was going to be in one of their N64 games, the almighty WCW NWO Revenge, playing his new gimmick, Wrath. He was in the game, mostly completed, and then once again, the character was dropped for unknown reasons, accessible only through using a cheat device. Chances are there's no one else who can lay claim to such an achievement, meaning that Brian Clark can congratulate himself on a thoroughly unique place in wrestling history. Well done, Brian. When options to create characters became common in wrestling games, it became the norm for characters to be hidden in plain sight. I mean, even if a wrestler may no longer be with a company, the game may still include all their signature moves and even their attire, creating them a piece of cake. For example, I can't just say that, oh, Hulk Hogan's in WWF No Mercy for the N64, because being able to make him easily is basically a feature. So what's really interesting here are the guys who were in the WWF at the time, but were still left on the chopping block. No Mercy, one of the best wrestling games of all time, is actually filled with such characters. The game's roster a bloody mess that had to be chopped up and changed drastically throughout the game's development. For example, the Big Show was supposed to not just be in the game, but a big part of it. He was going to be featured in the game's championship storyline and everything. And yet, when the game came out, Big Show wasn't just not part of said storyline, he wasn't part of the game at all. So, what happened? Well, even though the showster was pretty popular in the WWF, the one-time son of Andre the Giant was getting a bit, well, big. Porky, not fit to perform in other words.
He's fat!
As punishment, he was taken off TV while No Mercy was in development. At the last minute, Aki scrambled not just to take him out of the game, but to pick another guy from the roster to replace him in the storyline. And for whatever reason, they chose Steven Richards. You know, the Right to Censor guy. No? Well, he's there. People did wonder why Richards was such a big part of the game's storyline, despite being what Bobby Heenan would call a total hammer-negger. And, well, that's why. Why did Aki and THQ pick him? No one knows. People just assume he was next up in the character index. Well, either that or they had the world's biggest Big Stevie Cool mark on their staff. Bizarrely, even though he was removed, thanks to a bug in the game, Big Show will still randomly appear as an entrant in the Royal Rumble mode, something that puzzled many a gaming grapple fan over the years. Big Show's exclusion actually isn't the only one either. At one point there was going to be a version of No Mercy for the Game Boy Color, which enabled you to use a transfer pack to take a wrestler you'd made in a handheld game and put them on the Nintendo 64 cart, involving a special unique championship storyline. All this was nixed when the Game Boy Color version was cancelled, but doing this would have unlocked Gangrel, the Headbangers, and the Mean Street Posse. Now, if that's not a classic boys stable, I don't know what is. But alas, these guys basically ended up in no man's land when the handheld version was cancelled. But they're still in the code. Hell, the game still features the usual copyright spiel about the Gangrel character being the property of White Wolf, makers of Vampire the Masquerade, even though he's not in the game. So, if you ever wanted to know the reason behind this mysterious disclaimer, well, there you go. So, don't say you never learn anything from my vids. I could talk about hidden characters in wrestling games all day. There's so many oddities, including things like the almighty dinosaur hunter Torque being hidden in WWF Warzone, only accessible with a device. I mean, who wouldn't want to flat out cerebral bore their opponents and pin them to the mat? But, well, perhaps I should include some entries for the several amongst you who don't appreciate spandex for whatever reason. So let's relax, take to the skies, and talk about Nintendo's most important mascot of the 1980s. Obviously, I'm talking about Nestor. Some people will be very familiar with Nestor, and others might wonder who the bloody hell he is. Simply, Nestor was the mascot for the company's flagship US mag, Nintendo Power. He's the creation of everyone's favourite Nintendo employee, the ginger-haired sporting, bow-tie spinning, game-smashing son of a gun and Nintendo superfan, Howard Phillips. And the two star together in a comic strip called Nestor and Howard, where the plot basically consisted of the two playing against each other in whatever Ninty game's big that month. Gripping stuff, I'm sure you'll agree. However, short of the pages of the magazine, he didn't exactly feature much elsewhere in the world of NES, being limited to cameos in games like Star Tropics and To the Earth. He would finally get a chance to star on his own game in the mid-90s. On the Virtual Boy of all things. The poor sod. All that hard work promoting Nintendo, and his reward is blooming Nestor's funky bowling on the company's worst ever system. That just won't do. And, in fact, there's another way to become the almighty Nestor in a much more respectable title. Enter Pilot Wing 64. On, well, the Nintendo 64 obviously. A thoroughly chilled experience, and a game where you can finally play as Nestor in all but name. One of the lightweight pilots you can choose, a character named Lark, is, well, look at him. He's Nestor. There's no doubt about it. Just hidden there in plain sight. While it's never been outright confirmed by anyone at Nintendo, he's clearly the inspiration for this character. And it was certainly enough for Nintendo Power to call it an appearance for the game's mag's most famous son. Why they didn't just call the character Nestor is beyond me, and whatever explanation there is for not doing so is probably too silly for words. The longest running rumour why he was removed was because people outside the US wouldn't know who he is. But then again, all the characters in the game have never been seen before, so that's a bit of a daft urban legend now, isn't it? But whatever the truth may be, surely it's just another great reason to play Pilot Wings 64. Well, aside from it being a bloody good game and other irrelevant things like that.
No!
Obviously we're going to go back to Midway. If you think it's possible to do a video about hidden characters in games and not fill it up with entries from Midway's various titles, then you're dead wrong. This time around, we're taking a trip into the Netherrealm with Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3. The big update to the third MK game that everyone loves seeing, as it made various changes and added a lot of the series' best loved characters who were for some reason missing from the original Mortal Kombat 3 back into the game. It seems ridiculous for there to be a major Mortal Kombat game that doesn't feature Scorpion, but the first Mortal Kombat 3 is one of them. Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 fixed all of that, and a lot of people consider it to be the best of the classic Mortal Kombat games, including Ed Boon himself. Toasty! Even though it's a much bigger game in terms of size than the original MK3, Acclaim still went ahead and ported Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 to the Mega Drive and SNES. However, due to limited space, a lot of things had to be cut. Everything from stages to some of the fatalities, and even whole characters, including SHEEVA, the big Shokan female Goro equivalent. People weren't wholly unhappy to see the game in 16-bit, but they were perhaps a little bit underwhelmed and didn't think it to be an awful lot different to the 16-bit version of the original MK3. Still, there's something interesting about the SNES version. A deep, dark secret that'll treat you to some of the most brilliantly weird sights in any classic video game. Because you actually can play as SHEEVA in the SNES version, even though she should have been removed. You can find her by entering the 8-on-8 tournament mode, itself hidden with a simple cheat code, and then randomly picking characters to play as. You may find yourself landed with one that's just a generic E for a slot, and this is SHEEVA in the game. Nothing but a couple of tiny sprites. But despite this, she still does have most of her moves and combos. Those forearms can still beat the stuffing out of you, even if you can't see them. Playing as or against SHEEVA, as you might expect, makes the game go completely doolally. Some characters like Kano can't hit her at all. Some others' moves go straight through her. A bunch of stages will kill over at her very presence, and many moves will thoroughly crash the game, usually in spectacular fashion, and that goes double for fatalities. In fact, defeating her without crashing the game is a pretty tall order, and good lord, don't reset the game once you've crashed it, because the whole game will be rogered then, unless you turn it off properly anyways. Amusingly, SHEEVA does have one proper sprite that's recognisably her. If you somehow beat her without crashing the game in a million different ways and perform a babality, hooray! You actually get to see SHEEVA! Presumably crying because of our utter bloody state of her in this sport. But let's face it, the character doesn't have all that much else to shout about, does she? And it would just be plain irresponsible not to cover NBA Jam at all in this video, wouldn't it? It's not even an option. NBA Jam is the undisputed slam-dunking champion of hidden characters, complete with everything from extra NBA players to the game's staff, various pop culture icons, and the odd US president or two. It would be impossible to go through them all. But here's a set of controversial ones, as well as two very obscure characters who can only be found in the game's art assets. Kicking off with NBA Jam Tournament Edition, there's the case of the Mortal Kombat characters. Unlockable in the usual way by entering a certain set of initials and a date, you could play as Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Reptile, or Raiden. They're a bit more than just a head tacked onto a generic basketball player too. Not only do they have thoroughly non-mortal and beastly stats, but if you hold up and press past 20 times, you'll receive a message saying that fatalities are unlocked. Now, if the Mortal Kombat character you're playing as gets on fire, he can burn the opposition alive with a single push. It's only a visual effect and doesn't actually murder any poor innocent NBA pro, but it is certainly cool. However, all of this depends entirely on the version of the arcade that you're playing. If it's a later version of the game, then sadly, none of this will be available to you at all because it was blocked off. The Mortal Kombat characters only exist in revisions 1.0 and 2.0, simply because once the NBA got wind that they were in the game, they promptly told Midway to get that shit out of there. The clean living and family-friendly NBA hardly wanted to be associated with these head-ripping demons from the game that caused the likes of Tipper Gore to scream about thinking of the children or whatever, and so the God of Thunder and the three ninjas got themselves benched. Bah! What's even more obscure though, going to the original NBA Jam are these two mysterious, headless players. One with yellow skin and one with green skin, named B and G respectively. Sadly these weren't used in the game, but, well, what could they mean? Who could they refer to? No one knew for sure until 2019, when Rayan Ali, author of the book All About NBA Jam, uncovered video from 1992 of the NBA Jam team playing with two dolls. One of Bart Simpson and the other of Godzilla. Forget about playing as an undead ninja, you could have played as a giant fire-breathing kaiju monster. Sadly, Bart and Godzilla didn't make it. Maybe they were a little hot on the licensing front for it to be worth doing, and the headless sprites are all that remain. Ah, I do love me some NBA Jam. Not just because of being an awesome game, but because they're bottomless pits of facts for me to hunt down and make videos out of. Nice. Hello you. Thanks ever so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to be first to see future Fact Hunt episodes. Click on the bell if you already are to make sure you're notified, and be sure to check out my other episodes. And if you want to be super awesome, check out my Patreon. But thanks again for watching, and I'll be seeing you next time. Ta-ra for now.